Next up in the Heat Check series is Rob Dillingham, Kentucky's star guard who was on the maybe list as a one and done coming into the season, but eventually wowed in a backup role for Kentucky, placing himself firmly in the 2024 draft talks. Dillingham has been a highly touted recruit for a while, ranking as a 5-star for years now and playing with a variety of high schools, including Kanye West's Donda Academy. He was also one of the top original members of the OTE. We'll touch on this plenty, but he is pretty undersized at a listed 6'3", likely closer to 6'1"-ish, and he'll be around 19.5 on draft night. In 32 games with the Wildcats, he averaged 15.2 points, just shy of 4 assists and 3 rebounds, and shot 48% overall, 44% from 3, and 80% from the charity stripe. Here's how Heat Check works. I'm going to identify one draft prospect and grade them on what I believe to be the most generally important skills and aspects of their game: athleticism, scoring, defense, passing and playmaking, and overall feel for the game. After those 5, I'll grade one additional skill relative to that prospect that I think is going to have the biggest effect on their stock. That will be deemed the swing skill. Each skill will be graded on the Heat Check chart with ranges from freezing all the way to scorching. When that's all said and done, I'll divvy out one final overall score. Starting with Dillingham's athleticism, I've given him a cool grade. He's far from an impressive pure athlete, and when you couple that with his size at around 6 foot, it's fairly apparent at the collegiate level and will especially be that way in the NBA. He just doesn't have the vertical juice, 4 dunks in 32 games, and there are some finishing concerns that stem from that lack of verticality. The good news is that Dillingham is exceptionally coordinated and has lightning quick speed, great acceleration, and a nasty first step, which can all be categorized under here. He's certainly one of the fastest prospects I've scouted, capable of teleporting across the floor with quick, precise movements. Overall though, Dillingham's athleticism is likely going to be a con on most scouting reports. On to Dillingham's scoring, which I've graded scorching and is far and away his primary selling point to NBA teams. Let's just start with the simple stuff. Rob Dillingham averaged over 15 points in just 23 minutes off the bench for Kentucky, good for 26 points per 40. That alone is elite. He's at his most comfortable on offense, simply spotting up or using his jittery, ultra creativity off the dribble. He's a legit shot maker. His dribble pull-up game is one of the more impressive I personally have seen. His 44% from 3 on 4.5 attempts is great, and I think there's clear indicators already that he can be an elite shooter all over the court from the jump in the NBA. Clean mechanics, he's comfortable mixing up the ranges and shooting on the move, and he's got legitimate range. Contrary to most players, and maybe similarly to real NBA stars, it feels like he's truly comfortable getting to a variety of spots rather than attempting to get to the rim and working his way out from there. He's got a great handle, and that mix of burst, pure speed, and more makes him a dangerous ball handler. His offensive synergy chart lights up like a Christmas tree. Excellent in jump shots, both types of catch and shoot shots, and runners, and he ranks very good on dribble jumpers. In terms of play types, Dillingham scored most of his points spotting up and as the pick and roll handler, grading excellent per synergy in both. He ranked below average in transition, again likely due to those athleticism concerns, and good in isolation. His finishing is not his strongest point offensively. That athleticism rears its head there, and that's not going to get any easier at the next level, but it's not abysmal. There's touch, and I think there's going to be other outlets eventually, such as runners, floaters, and more that he can get to kind of counteract that. But the other 2 levels are about as elite as it gets for a guard. In summary, Dillingham has a pretty incredible offensive game, and more specifically one tailor-made for the modern NBA. On to Dillingham's defense, which warrants our first freezing grade of the cycle. Typically, I'll almost always award players some leeway in this area. I think defense especially is an area where prospects can make tremendous strides at the next level, but his ceiling and floor as a defender are really limited by his size, and if he were to be selected in the lottery, I'd wager he'll be outright the worst defender in that bunch. Truthfully, Dillingham's defense isn't consistently bad on tape. His on-ball defense portrays some pretty consistent struggles, usually due to a strength deficit, but it's not as bad as many are led to believe, and the off-ball product is even better than that. He's really attentive and is generally fairly good about reading lanes, picking his moment, 1 steal per game on the year. The issue being, he will likely be hunted similarly to any small offensive-minded point guard, and strength creators could have a field day. Again, the good news is that there is try there. He is not a traffic cone. He's got quick enough movement to be pesky, and I think there's pathways towards creating a winning squad around him by A, using a legitimate rim protector, and B, putting other solid POA defenders there. The real issue here is that he is just kind of playing with a bad hand. I've graded Dillingham's passing and playmaking scorching. On the year, Dillingham has registered 124 assists to 64 turnovers for a near 2-to-1 ratio, all in limited minutes off the bench, which is really impressive. He functioned essentially as Kentucky's backup point guard, somewhat splitting that role with Reed Sheppard, and he was great passing the ball in that role. He was able to make simple reads, but show off some really flashy stuff too. Typically, these stats would be good enough to warrant a hot grade from me for passing and playmaking, but the thing that pushes me to scorching for Dillingham is the live dribble aspect, or really at its core, just that pure playmaking. As we've covered, his handle is great, and he has an array of dribble moves to keep himself incessantly moving with the ball in hands. Add to it the fact he can make a variety of correct passing reads off the dribble, and you have yourself a weapon. Dillingham is so easily able to break defenses down with that first step and capitalize on easy passes, with some more advanced stuff intermingled plenty often. His creativity as a handler, able to seamlessly flow from scorer to passer and back and forth, really just exudes star power to me. He has a tendency to get pretty wild, similarly to his shot selection, but again, all things that I think will tighten up with time. The scorching grade is a bit of projection on my end. I just think he's going to be a legitimate passer in the NBA based off the tape that I've seen. Moving on to Dillingham's unquantifiable feel for the game, I've given him a hot grade. I think it's clear via his quintessential scoring, preternatural passing, and more that he's a highly skilled, high feel player. Even with size concerns, I really don't see him taking that long to figure out how to succeed in the NBA, given the right circumstance. The reason I couldn't quite get to scorching, again, is that wild streak I just touched on. There are a few times a game where he can really get overzealous, a bit too frenetic. Again, I fully expect his game to continue to ratchet up, but his shot selection is not sparkling, the passing and playmaking is not yet a perfect product, etc. There's likely not one tangible skill for Dillingham to make leaps and bounds in as a player. Defense would be the obvious one, but there's not a real pathway to him making some huge leap on that end. So I've gone with general playability as his swing skill, kind of mixing all the things that could keep him off the court together. In an earlier heat check, I covered Donovan Clingan's playability as a traditional 5, and that same principle applies to an undersized point guard who's a potential liability on the defensive end. In order to keep yourself on the floor at 6'1", you are going to have to be elite in certain areas, those being scoring and playmaking for Rob Dillingham. Does he have the offensive juice to be a Darius Garland, or is he going to be closer to Bones Highland? It's an incredibly fine line, and honestly one that could come down to team fit, development track, etc. There's likely going to be some NBA teams that go through their assessment of Dillingham and just flat out land on no, he's not worth the lottery gamble due to a variety of factors. I personally feel like his combination of scoring and playmaking is just that good. I'd feel comfortable swinging on him and developing him to play full-time point guard. I really believe his scoring is translatable enough to get him to that Garland, Brunson, Mitchell point down the line, especially with the added bonus of him being a really good passer, which not all those guys had coming out of college. But again, the team that drafts him is likely going to have that same philosophy in order for things to really work out. And I do think there's even more valid questions to be brought up, not just in terms of NBA success, but real postseason success. The grade. I've given Rob Dillingham a grade of 8.3, which is pretty good overall and great for this 2024 draft class. I'm thinking at this point that's probably going to land him within my top 5, potentially even higher. Dillingham is assuredly going to be really polarizing in this class. If he was 2 inches taller with a more filled out build, he'd probably be the #1 pick. Undersized guards are allegedly a dying breed, but they also litter the upper ranks of the NBA. Damian Lillard, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, Trae Young, 5 of 7 Eastern Conference All-Star guards this season, 6'2" or shorter. All of those guys are, of course, known for their white-hot scoring prowess, not necessarily their defense. But again, I also get the argument that drafting a lightly built 6-foot-ish guard really high in the draft might not be the best way to maximize your chances of getting to the finals. Overall, I'm just kind of going with my gut here when it comes to Dillingham. I think he's going to be a really good player for a long time in the NBA based off what I've seen. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think of Rob Dillingham, what you grade him, what you draft him. Drop who you want to see in the next heat check. We'll see you later.